I'm sure based on what I've saw from the comments on the cloud, many of us have been directly or indirectly been affected by schizophrenia. And it's really nice to talk about these things because unfortunately, there's a lot of stigma behind it, a lot of secrecy behind this illness. And that's something as a group, as SSY, we're trying to reduce and have more conversation about this. So this event is a panel event. We have a bunch of great, amazing speakers that we're so privileged and lucky to have. And they're going to be talking about their own lived experiences with this illness. But as you know already, I'm sure many of you have known this, it's very different for a lot of people. There's, of course, certain things that are general, certain hallucinations, but each person's individual journey is very different. And that's why we try to shed light on in this event, the Duality of Reality event, this annual event that we have. Now, before I do anything, let me just introduce myself properly here. My name is Vijay Raj. I'm the president of Schizophrenia Society of York. That's when you see SSY. It's an acronym for Schizophrenia Society of York. We are a student-based club out of York University. We hope to reduce the stigma and awareness behind this mental illness. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what SSY is coming up. But that's what this event's all about. And I want to congratulate you and everyone here for taking the time out to come learn and discuss and talk about schizophrenia. It's not something that happens often enough. And I hope we can provide a safe space, a safe haven for us to all talk about this illness, talk about how it may directly or indirectly affect us, and also hear from other people who have experienced this. So that's what this event's all about. And we're also partnered up with Schizophrenia Society of Canada, the national charity. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Let me just go forward here. We did this already. And before we get into all the panel speakers, I want to just provide some context about what schizophrenia is. I'm not going to do too much. I'm not a scientist or doctor or anything like that. I'm just providing some information for everyone here who may not know this already, just to give some context before we get to the speakers, okay? What is schizophrenia? And there's a lot of ways you can describe this, but the way I'm going to describe this right now is that it's an illness, a mental illness that is, or psychiatric illness that is characterized by episodes of psychosis, which can cause individuals to have distorted perceptions of reality. This can come in the form of hallucinations, audible, visual, olfactory, many different ways. And essentially, schizophrenia is categorized into two different types of symptoms. As I'm sure some of you already know, there's positive and negative symptoms. Positive symptoms are things like hallucinations. Those will be positive symptoms. Negative symptoms will be, I think somebody mentioned, like cognitive decline, social isolation, depression, those type of things we consider in the negative symptoms category. And in terms of prevalence, it's prevalent approximately 1% of the world population, 1% in Canada, 1% in the world. So it's a huge chunk of people who are affected by this, but it's not talked about enough. That's where we're here. With proper treatment generally, these symptoms can be managed for the most part, but everyone's situation is very unique and different. Of course, talk to your own doctor, talk to your psychiatrist, but what best treatment you can take to really manage these symptoms. But a lot of things about schizophrenia is still it's unknown. It's not, even from the origins, even how it develops, a lot of things are very unknown about it. And there's still a lot of research going on. And we hope to help out in this research in terms of funding, in terms of bringing awareness. Once again, this is where Schizophrenia Society of York tries to contribute in this community. So that's a little bit of what schizophrenia is. Now, who are we? Schizophrenia Society of York. So it was founded in 2019, this student-run club, by a person named Liva. And it's actually the first and only schizophrenia awareness club organization at York University. I believe it's actually one of the few, or if it could be one, or yeah, definitely a few of the clubs that are in Ontario or even in Canada. It's not something that's advocated for or talked about. So that's where we come in. We hope to provide that. We aim to humanize individuals with schizophrenia and psychosis-related disorders. Instead of just talking purely from the clinical side of it, that's great. But what about the person? What about them actually talking to us? This event will be fulfilling that. We provide a platform to educate others and raise awareness about mental illness. We focus on real lived experience of schizophrenia and psychosis. The last year, we have raised money for organizations such as Schizophrenia Society of Canada and for schizophrenia research. It's a very, very important things. Now, I'm just going to quickly introduce the executive team that actually organizes this whole thing. It's not just me at SSY. We have a whole list of teams, a whole list of members in the team, the executive team, who have worked tirelessly to make this event possible. I'm just going to quickly call them out. They're just going to introduce themselves, and we're going to go down the list here. So I'm just going to quickly call out the founder of SSY, Laiba.
Hi, everyone. I am the founder and now advisor of SSY. I'm super excited that this event is in its third year. It's an annual event now, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the news stories and perspectives of our speakers.
Perfect. Thank you, Laiba. Next up is the VP of Operations, Manur.
Hey guys, I'm Manur. I'm VP of SSY, and I was so excited to join on this event and, setting this up and having all of the amazing speakers come in. It's really exciting. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, Manur. Lavanya.
Hey guys, my name is Lavanya and I'm the Vice President of Marketing at SSY. This is my second year at SSY and I learned a lot being a part of the team and being a part of all these amazing initiatives and events. And I'm just really excited to have our guest speakers and to hear their unique stories today. Thank you.
Thank you, Lavanya. Samia.
Hi, everybody. My name is Samia, and I'm the events director, and I'm excited to hear everyone's speeches, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Samia. Ashweja.
Hi, guys. I'm Ash. I'm also the director of events here, and I'm super excited to hear from everyone.
Thank you. And Gurkran.
Hi, my name is Gurkran. I'm the current director of marketing for SSY. And I'm really looking forward to learning from all of our great speakers tonight. And thank you for everyone for coming out tonight.
Thank you, Gurkhan. Jaya?
And I would just like to thank everyone else today.
Perfect. And Anna?
Hi, everyone. My name is Anna, and I'm one of the directors of external affairs at SSY. And I'm really looking forward to this wonderful event. And I wanted to thank our wonderful speakers for being here today.
Thank you, Anna. And last but not least, I just want to give a special shout out to one particular member who actually went above and beyond in setting up this whole marketing for this event. And she really went out of her way, and it's very obvious. So I just want to give her a special shout out, is Josephine.
Hi, everyone. My name is Josephine. I am the administrative associate for SSY, and this is my first time attending this event, and I'm just really excited to hear from all the speakers and just learn from them.
Thank you, Josephine, and thank you, the rest of the exec team. Maybe I have the best team I could possibly imagine, and I'm very excited to get this event underway. And that's our executive team. Now I'm just going to talk, Laiba and I'm just going to talk a little bit about what SSY actually means to the both of us. I'll start with Laiba. She's the founder of SSY.
Okay, thanks for that. So SSY is a platform that raises awareness and helps break the stigma surrounding schizophrenia and psychosis through lived experiences. When I founded SSY, I had the aim of not only supporting those affected by schizophrenia directly, but even indirectly through family members. So we offer a supportive environment for not only those individuals, but also for their loved ones. And the second piece of supporting loved ones is something SSY really stands for, and I believe it distinguishes us from a lot of the other organizations, because often we forget how others and even society is being affected and its implications. But when mental illness affects one person, the impacts go beyond just the individual directly affected by the illness. So SSY tells us something very important about being human. this is all part of the human experience and what it means to be human. So there's nothing differentiating someone from schizophrenia from any other human except stigma. So SSY stands for breaking that stigma and the misconception on what schizophrenia and psychosis is. So SSY is not just about understanding another individual's feelings, but sharing them as well, which is something we often abandon, forgetting our capability as humans to quite literally feel. So SSY is, to me, it's an avenue to learn to see ourselves in others and realize that schizophrenia or any other mental illness does not choose specific people to affect. It could happen to anyone at any given moment. It could even happen to any of us here if we're not already affected. So once we realize and see the person as our own and not the others, when we'll truly gain an empathetic understanding of mental illness. So that's what SSY means to me.
Thank you, Laiba, and that was great. And clearly the mission behind SSY started and spearheaded by Laiba. So for me, what SSY kind of became was when I was first interested in researching a lot about schizophrenia, because I had a family member who was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And somehow I saw there was a club that just started 2019 that was about psychosis and schizophrenia. And I was amazed. I thought, wow, I thought I was the only person who had somebody who knows about schizophrenia. I didn't know this was actually, there's such a community behind it. I was so surprised. And that's when I joined as a general member. And I continued from there to president now, because I truly believe in what I represent, which is a community, a safe community where we can all talk and discuss and just discuss about schizophrenia. That's not an option. It's not something we do often. And try and break that stigma behind it, the scarcity behind it. It's just, we're all unique, we're all different, and it's just one part of the human experience, like I was talking about. So that is what SSY means to me, and that's what SSY means to the founder of SSY. Now, I would just like to talk just a little bit about the two sponsors who are actually supporting us in terms of on area for the speakers tonight, and also supporting us in so many different ways. We couldn't have done this without these two sponsors. Number one, Schizophrenia Society of Canada, who is the nationally registered charity behind schizophrenia. They do similar work as SSY, but on a national scale, of course. And they support people with schizophrenia. So this is definitely a great resource to look up if you want to learn more about schizophrenia, and if you know somebody who's been diagnosed with schizophrenia, it's definitely something you want to look up or contribute to or learn more about. You can definitely look at their website. One of the newest initiatives that I'll be talking about, or that's happening right now, is actually the Cannabis and Mental Health Project. I'm also part of this project as well. It's a very interesting. It's a very interesting project right now, especially because cannabis is kind of widespread at the moment. There's also a very strong link between cannabis and psychosis. The idea behind this initiative is just purely to provide information about what exactly cannabis is and your relationship with the substance, and just to almost self-reflect on your relationship. It's not about say no or anything like that. It's purely just thinking about what is cannabis, what's the information behind it, what's the history behind it, what are implications behind it. And that's all. There's actually a course on this. So if you're interested in it, you can definitely check out cannabisandmentalhealth.ca. Check out the course, like 90 minutes. And it's really informative and tells you a lot about the history and implications and what exactly cannabis and how it can impact your mental health. So those are all the things I wanted to talk about. Now let's get to the actual meat of this whole meeting, which is the speakers. And I'm so excited for all the speakers we have today. We have such a diverse group of speakers and very impactful speakers. And we're going to first start off with a colleague of mine, and he's actually a student at York University. I met him a couple of months ago, who came to one of our fundraising events, and he told me about his diagnosis. And I was so intrigued by his story that I had to invite him and speak at our event. The first guest, or the first speaker, is Kalpit. A little bit about Kalpit is he's currently a York University student studying psychology in his 4th year. He was diagnosed with primary psychosis in November 2021. He is passionate about helping others, especially those facing mental health issues. He's also into comedy and does stand-up and improv, and believes laughter can help with health. Now, without further ado, please help me welcome Kalpit Sharma.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all having a good day so far. I would like to thank Schizophrenia Society of York for inviting me to speak on this platform. I would also like to wish my fellow students best of luck for their upcoming finals. I know it's a stressful time and it's important to take it easy and not let the stress take control over you. So without further ado, I would like to take you all on my rather short but lively life journey that I've lived so far. So I went to one of the best boarding schools in India for my middle and high school. It was called the Doon School, Dehradun. And my high school taught me a lot. It has helped shape me into who I am today, be it good or bad. When I was in 11th grade, that was the first time when I had my cigarette. I was just 16 years old and didn't know how much damage this is going to cause me. I continued smoking cigarettes for approximately 5 to 6 years. And then the dreadful COVID-19 happened. Everyone was doing something to change their lives, be it reading regularly, working out, or starting a business. That's when I thought to myself, I'm also going to make a change in my life. I will quit smoking cigarettes forever. I read a book called The Easy Way to Quitting Smoking by Alan Carr, and I went cold turkey with smoking. And just like that, I left smoking completely. I know this sounds great so far, but I made a mistake that would cost me for my entire life. I switched from smoking cigarettes to smoking weed. And like every other university student who acts as an advocate for weed being better than cigarettes, I became one too. I didn't really research on it, but I knew this wouldn't give me cancer, wasn't addictive, or harm me in any other way. Little did I know I was wrong about all these things. To get rid of smoking cigarettes, I was smoking weed every single day. And like with anything in this world, you start building a tolerance. I started building a tolerance for weed. I ended up getting high percentages of THC in my weed and was smoking more often. There came a, ti- there came a time in my life in 2021 summer when I used to start my day with smoking weed, then smoke throughout the day and smoke before sleeping at night. Yeah, I know. That's a lot of weed affecting my brain. Results? I started talking to birds. This may sound funny, but it's true. I started losing touch with my reality because of smoking weed. I started developing paranoid and delusional thoughts. I was afraid people were out to harm me. I thought people could communicate with their thoughts and words were unnecessary. Try imagining how difficult it will be if you thought that people could read your thoughts. We all have bad thoughts once in a while. Imagine living in the terror that your bad thoughts are being projected to the world and you're being judged based on that. This made me quiet, like really quiet. I would stick to myself and not speak to people. I would be in my thoughts most of the time because I thought my thoughts were real and that was reality for me. I was not comfortable sharing this with anybody else apart from my brother. And I'm grateful I have someone like him in my life. When I first told him about all this, he strongly suggested I get off weed and that this should make matters better. But it didn't. I did end up leaving weed, but these thoughts didn't leave me. That's when we came to a conclusion that I should seek help for this. I called my GP and he set up a meeting with me for me with CAMH. I remember walking in through that door, sitting on that chair, meeting my first psychiatrist, Dr. Balyut, and my soon to be case manager, Tom. And when they asked me what was wrong, I couldn't stop. There was a list of things on my mind. I thought there was something metallic in me controlling my body. I was hearing voices, and these voices would sometimes be good and sometimes be bad. There were times when these voices would say some really mean things to me. And there were also times when these voices would force me to study. Yeah, I know you must be thinking, how can studying be bad for you? But it wasn't the studying that affected me. I did get good grades. It was the fact that it was my family's voices I could hear telling me to study over and over again. This disrupted the relationship I had with my family and friends. I remember telling them about how one of the biggest gangsters in India was mad at me for I cussed him in my thoughts, and he was going to kill me and my family unless we paid him money. And I would hear completely unrelated conversations between my brother and my father and think they're talking about the same issue. The biggest evil I found was confirmation bias. I would be in my thoughts and think what others were talking about was related to my thoughts. There was just so much pain in me. Luckily, I had great doctors and they knew how I was feeling and what I was experiencing. They told me that I have psychosis, and it was almost as if the ground slid beneath my feet. I remember walking back home that day, crying on the streets because I genuinely thought I was insane. That was a long walk for me. I regretted every single decision I had taken, which led me to that point. I did think of harming myself, but I realized I'm a fighter, and I was going to fight this and prove to people that I won't let something as small as psychosis stop me from reaching my full potential. When I reached home, I told my parents everything. They didn't know what psychosis was until I told them about it. They didn't understand the gravity of the situation I was facing. They consulted my uncle, who was well read, and when he told them it was serious, that's when they realized that some action must be taken about this. My medical team was telling me to get on medication, but I was hesitant at first because of the side effects and the fact that I would be on medication for the rest of my life. But then I did my research and realized medication along with psychotherapy gives you the best results. That's when I told my parents that I should be on medication, although they were against it. And I listened to them till a certain point. I wasn't on medication for the first 3 months after my first visit to the doctors. Matters weren't getting any better. If anything, they were getting slightly worse. I was afraid of the side effects such as weight gain and tardive dyskinesia, which is involuntary movements of your mouth and torso, etc. But I evaluated the pros and cons and decided to go ahead with the medication. I started taking the medication last year in Feb. I started off with atypical antipsychotics and continued with CBT with Tom. I was experiencing some positive and some negative symptoms. As it was explained before, but let me explain again. For those of you who don't know what positive symptoms are those symptoms that one experiences that weren't there before, such as hallucinations, paranoia, delusions, etc. And negative symptoms are lessening or absence of normal behaviors, such as lack of showing emotions, lack of concentration. I was a very happy-go-lucky type of guy before psychosis. There was always a smile on my face, no matter the situation. Psychosis took that away from me. It's honestly difficult for me to smile now. But as I said earlier, I am a fighter, and I wasn't going to let this go so easily. This may not be medically proven, but I genuinely believe joining an improv class helps you with psychosis. That's exactly what happened with me. I learned to laugh again, and I did that by making others laugh. That's where my passion lies, I realized, in making other people laugh. And it bodes well with me that I don't smile a lot because it helps when you deliver a joke with a straight face. After realizing that psychosis can also help me, I started applying this to every single aspect of my life. How can I use psychosis to my advantage? I thought to myself, if my reality is distorted and I can choose to live in any reality I want, I'm going to live in the best reality possible. I chose to wake up early in the morning, do my workout, eat healthy, study, and live my life in the best possible manner. Psychosis may take my smile away, but I know it will never take my ability to find the positive in the negative. I somehow managed to push through my last 2 years of school, and I'm finally here, ready to graduate with a degree in psychology, and I will hopefully be able to use it to help others like me. If anything, psychosis has given me a different perspective to look at things. This may sound odd, but I'm grateful for having experienced such a disease. It has opened my eyes at an early age. It has helped me mature. I've come to realize what's important in life and what's not. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I do know that anything can happen tomorrow. So it's best to chase those things that make you happy. And real meaningful things, not substances that give you pleasure momentarily, but things that can have a deep impact on your life. Slowly and steadily, I started seeing some changes. And I think it was a combination of things working in my favor: eating healthy, working out, sleeping well, the medication, improv, and psychotherapy. The voices were getting softer, the paranoia was reducing, so were the delusions. I even started talking to my family and friends again. Slowly, my parents could see the old culprit come back to life, which brings me here today. Not only am I confident enough to talk to you about what I am experiencing, I'm also joking about it in my stand up sets. I treat psychosis like a war that I will have to fight throughout my life. And every battle that I win gets me one step closer to winning that war. Before I go, I want to leave you guys with two things. One is a piece of advice, and the other, a joke. The advice is that it is imperative that you communicate whether you have psychosis or not. Communicating my problems with my family, my doctors, and the people around me not only helped reduce the stigma around psychosis, but also helped me lead a better life. It helped my doctors and my family understand my situation better. It helped them better understand what I was going through and how they can help. Communication is a gift that we have, and we shouldn't shy away from using it. Rather, use it to the best of our capabilities. And finally, a one-liner written by me. I was confused what to do with my life, so people told me to listen to my inner voice, and now I have schizophrenia. Thank you.
Thank you, Calvin. Thank you for Calvin. You're definitely a fighter. I can tell that by your story. I can tell that by your demeanor. I can tell by your words, your joke. And I love the fact that you chose to change the perspective of how you view this illness. That's so interesting. That's such a very interesting take on using humor to make you feel at ease. That's very interesting. Thank you, Calvin. So as of right now, we're going to open up. So how it's going to work is we won't do Q&As right now. We will do Q&As at the end. So I'm going to give everybody maybe 3 minutes to kind of think of any questions you have, maybe write it down. We also have a form that will be shared on the chat. You can put it there, and we can talk to all the speakers at the end of it. So please take some time. We will start with the next speaker around 6:44, 6:45. Take some time and ask any questions you have on, write it down, and we'll ask you at the end. Thank you, Calvin.
Also to mention, you spoke about how 1% of the population experiences schizophrenia. And I just feel glad that I'm in the top 1% at such an early age.
You're definitely in the top 1%. Thank you, Calvin. And maybe you can put if you're doing improv, maybe you can put it somewhere where we can all watch you.
Oh yeah,
on the chat.
Sure.
Yes, please do. And I see some people asking on the chat if there's going to be a recording. There will be a recording. You just had to contact us, but we'll be posting clips on Instagram in the next coming weeks.
So guys, the Q&A link tree is in there. You guys can check that out. It's in the chat.
Perfect. We'll get started in just about a minute. So if you have any questions, please just write it down. We'll definitely get to all the questions in the Q&A period. All right, everyone. Well, thank you once again, Calpit, for that amazing story. Like I mentioned earlier, you're definitely a fighter, and your humor definitely enlightens us all. And I believe he's going to put his improv. So if anyone's interested, please go ahead and go to his improv and show support. So now moving on from Calpit, we'll have another speaker who is actually the CEO of one of our sponsors. Dr. Chris Somerville has been involved in early psychosis and schizophrenia recovery movement for over 30 years as an international leader. For 25 years, he was the CEO of the Manitoba Schizophrenia Society. Since 2007, has acted as the CEO of Schizophrenia Society of Canada. He's one of the first board members of the Mental Health Commission of Canada and remains an avid supporter and advocates for recovery-oriented mental health services. So with that being said, please help me welcome Chris Somerville.
Chris, I think you're muted.
Thank you so much. Anyway, thank you so much. I'll start over here. I wished I looked like that picture of about 10 years ago, but when you enter your 71st year, things start to sag. And we won't get into that discussion, will we? But nonetheless, I just love the work that I do, and especially because of people like you who just become contagious. I mean, you come alive. Now you see my prosthetic hook. Now, by the way, you are already asking in your mind, and don't you lie to me, where is this guy really from, right? He can't be from Canada. So you could guess in the chat box if you want to. The most common answer is that I'm from Arkansas. No, I have no relationship to Bill Clinton. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama in 1952 during the Civil Rights Movement. I remember Martin Luther King there writing the Birmingham Letter. I remember the Ku Klux Klan marching. I remember the separated washrooms. I remember the bombing of the Baptist church there and the 6 kids that were killed. And so those were very tumultuous times filled with a lot of prejudice and stigma and racism, etc. Now, let's go forward. Around the middle of the 1960s, my brother went to the Vietnam War, and he developed cannabis-induced psychosis at that time. So I am a family member of someone with lived experience of schizophrenia, a brother with bipolar disorder, 2 suicides in my family, my father and my brother, another brother, myself struggling with suicidal ideation, depression, and perhaps probably psychosis in my teen years, though we didn't have any knowledge about it. I mean, mental health literacy was 0. So, and you're talking with us tonight and amongst yourselves. I mean, we didn't have these kind of conversations that we could be part of in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But nonetheless, I came to Canada in 1985. I was a pastor in Niagara Falls, Ontario, my favorite pastorate. And then a chaplain at McMaster Medical University Center. And then in 1995, we came to Steinbach, Manitoba. So Steinbach, Manitoba is 67 kilometers southeast of Winnipeg. And I began, working with the Manitoba Schizophrenia Society. Now, someone said in the chat, what's the difference between psychosis and schizophrenia? Psychosis is the general term. So psychosis is a feature of an illness, right? So there's about 16 illnesses that can have psychosis related to it. Now, let's define psychosis. Psychosis is when you have hallucinations and or delusions that affect your perception of reality. Now, doesn't mean you're totally psychotic or anything like that. You can know where you live, you know who the prime minister is, but you still believe the RCMP have bugged your house and that you can't go out and eat at McDonald's or any place like that because someone's trying to kill you. Hence an illusion. Hearing voices that are distressing. Now, by the way, not all voices are distressing. Some people, when their voices lead them through medication, they miss their voices. That's interesting, isn't it? Because they're not that distressing. And schizophrenia. So some of the illnesses that can have psychosis are Parkinson's disease, epilepsy, heart disease, I said, through medication, brain tumor, thyroid problems, postpartum psychosis, depression associated with psychosis. So schizophrenia is a diagnosis that you get when all those other things are ruled out. Now, schizophrenia is just a label, okay? Just get over it, okay? Well, y'all just do that. It is a diagnostic term. The DSM of psychiatry is like a Bible, and it's literally that thick, okay? And between my thumb and my forefinger, that's about 4 or 5 inches, okay? And it's all observational. There's nothing clinical. There's no blood tests. Anyway, psychiatrists get together about every 4 or 5 years and have conversations. And then they develop this cluster of observational symptoms. So you can have observational symptoms of what someone may be like or acting like when they have PTSD or depression. And hence you hallucinations, delusions, negative symptoms, depression, anxiety, cognitive challenges, and that type of thing. So what I say to people when they come to me, they say, well, I'm a schizophrenic. Well, language is very important. So I say, might I suggest you're a person who lives with schizophrenia? Let's get rid of the diagnostic label in terms of that being medical. Now, it's helpful in medicine, but a diagnostic label is not your identity. And that is the biggest hurdle that we have to help people with initially, is that even though you receive this diagnosis, that is not your identity. Now, 3% of the population will experience psychosis. So Anthony Hopkins, the actor Anthony Hopkins, he hears voices every day, but he's not diagnosed with schizophrenia. So you need to know about the Hearing Voices International. And we used their curriculum at the Manitoba Schizophrenia Society when I was there in terms of helping people who hear voices that are distressing when the medication won't take it away. And there are effective ways of dealing with it. Now, 1% of the population will experience schizophrenia. Now, here's a statement I always make. If you've met one person with schizophrenia, you hear what I just said? One person. So we met Calpit here, okay? And if I got that name, I apologize. Oh, by the way, I'm a Canadian citizen, so I'm legal. I'm okay to talk with y'all. I love Canada, have a daughter here, and we're the only Summeralds, and it's great here. If you met one person with schizophrenia, for heaven's sakes, you just met one person, because schizophrenia is not homogeneous. It's heterogeneous, means it's multiple illnesses, and the cluster of symptoms can vary from person to person. So hence, the treatment has to be very holistic. And when I say treatment, don't get me wrong, okay? I'm not talking about just medication, because when I've done over 1,500 media presentations, and the media people always say, well, how do you keep these people on their medication? As if that's all you need. Well, the response to schizophrenia is very holistic as a person. So as persons, we are biological, psychological, emotional, we're social, we're communal. So everything we can get together to help people in managing and living beyond the limitations of schizophrenia is what we call the recovery philosophy. Don't say model, it's not a model, a recovery philosophy. philosophy. Now, in Canada, we live in one of the most biomedical countries in the world. So it's been very hard to get the recovery philosophy to be implemented in terms of mental health systems and services. And what we call that is recovery-oriented mental health services and systems. Now, what does recovery mean? Recovery means that people can recover from the losses. So what are the things people are recovering from? Well, they're recovering from loss, especially if you develop mental illnesses in adolescence and early adulthood. You're recovering from lost self-esteem, self-identity, maturation. You may lose family, friends, difficulty finding workplace accommodations, economic problems, and wow, trauma. Trauma is one of the most unaddressed features of people who have mental illnesses, especially psychosis and schizophrenia. And you say, Chris, how do you know that? How do I know that? Listening to people's stories. Don't ever go to someone and say, what's the matter with you? Go to people and say, tell me, what happened to you? And when you listen to people's stories, it's not going to be the DSM. They're going to talk about their lived experience, their living experiences of trauma, deprivation, losses, depression, along with what we call features of psychosis and that type of thing. So therefore, people in Canada need access to the best of medications, including medications that address negative symptoms, because you know what? And you're supposed to say what? You know what? What repulses society when they see one on a bus or a sidewalk that has schizophrenia? It's not the hallucinations. I mean, everybody talks in the air now with Bluetooth or iPhones or whatever. That's no big deal anymore. So the negative symptoms of abolition, lack of will, some others are affective flattening, not showing emotional features on your face, alogia, difficulty communicating, and hedonia, which is emotional again, asociality, which means that you just don't feel comfortable mixing with other people. So those 5 A's, I actually believe is what, quote, turns off most people. Now, let's get this out of the way. And I don't know if Lauren agrees with me, but I'm a big fan of Lauren. Lauren is a blessing. Bless her heart. Lauren, give me a smile. She's got the most fantastic website, Living Well with Schizophrenia, I declare. Now, my Southern histrionics is coming through, okay? But you love it. And it's people like Lauren and Coprid and others who help give us a realistic face to schizophrenia, because where do people get their views about mental illness and schizophrenia? Well, Hollywood movies, sitcoms, cartoons on Saturday, Anti-Maniacs, high-profile cases in terms of, let's say, the Vince Lee situation here in Manitoba, the Greyhound massacre, or killing, which he's doing well today, just had no relapse after 12 years, is doing well. But that's where society gets their views about mental illness, as well as your family of origin. So when I was growing up in Birmingham, Alabama, what did we call people of color? Well, I'm not going to say the word. I was supposed to use the separated washrooms. When I walked down the street in Birmingham, Alabama, as a little skinny one-armed nerd, people of color would move to the sidewalk. And I thought, well, they're just being nice to me because I'm a nice person. No, it had nothing to do about your niceness, Chris. It had to do with the fact that you had a superpower of whiteness about you. And so the same thing with people with mental illnesses. We have to see persons, not label. We have to deconstruct the biomedical model to some degree, even though I have a wonderful psychiatrist. Hey, you know what? I performed her wedding. So much about boundary violations. And that's a big issue in psychiatry, is that these boundaries become walls. And when you're admitted to a psychiatric institution, which I was 3+ years ago, people didn't have recovery conversations with me. You know, they didn't ask me what my hopes and dreams were. You know what they wanted to determine? What was my baseline? How many of you know what a baseline is? Well, as far as I know, baseline is what you're supposed to look like and act like normally when everything's sort of normal all around you, or what have you. I was doing peer support, actually. You know, there were no peer support workers there, and I was well enough to do peer support. And what's peer support? Peer support is just where you mutually share heart to heart with another individual about what you're experiencing and the agony of it, and then what your hopes and dreams are. And especially with peer support who have lived experience of mental illness and lived experience of recovery, it's one of the major things that we need to introduce with people who get these diagnoses, is introducing to peer support workers. Because, I mean, you have it in breast cancer, you have it in HIV, you have it in other illness areas, but it's been a long time coming in mental health, because psychiatry has been bigoted in itself, and that, well, these people who are mentally ill, they can't do this work. Yes, they can do that work. So when I left the Manitoba Schizophrenia Society 3 years ago to work more exclusively with the Schizophrenia Society of Canada, which I started working with in 2007, with the Manitoba Schizophrenia Society, we transitioned it to a peer support organization. And so today we have 31 peer support workers who are working in clinical settings. Now, let me reference, I'm gonna try to, I get excited talking to all of y'all. Let's go back to 1965 and 67 with my brother Terry, who actually died last week. So it's been a lot of emotion with me this week. Terry was 76. He left Alabama to go to Texas because he was involved with the criminal justice system, drugs, and spent time in prison. And the Alabama judge says the only way you can avoid sentencing is go to Texas. So his daughter came and got him from Texas, and then he wound up in 2001 at this VA home, which is an absolute dump, okay? It's the worst dump I've ever seen in my life. And so the last 22 years, he'd never seen his grandchildren, didn't see his daughters, lived in a non-recovery oriented, non-person centered place. And he died last week from other complications. You know, he did quite well actually in the last 15 or 18 years, but there was no quality of life. So you can take medication all you want to, okay? Hear me. There are a lot of people who take medication, but they don't have quality of life. And so we don't provide people with safe, affordable homes. You can call a home, not a house. Providing with adequate income. We're talking about the social determinants of health, addressing their addiction issues, which he had. Trauma, unresolved trauma, sexual abuse that was in my family and even towards me. You know, these things are so complicated. And so nobody knows the cause of, I remember I was going to say to y'all, no one knows the cause of schizophrenia or any mental illness. Now, psychiatrists say it's a hypothesis. You know what a hypothesis is? It's a myth, but it's a good myth. And it's nice to have good myths and hypotheses, but we don't know exactly all this stuff. You know, things come along like genetics and brain chemistry, intrauterine difficulties, et cetera, but we know it's multiple complications. Now, let me move on, okay. 67% of people who have schizophrenia will experience recovery. Wow, you'll never hear that in the media. That means that long-term studies demonstrate that people can learn to live beyond the limitations of a mental illness, like Lauren has, live beyond the limitations of a mental illness with hope, purpose, and meaning, and social inclusion. But it takes the support of a caring community. And even though medication is crucial, like I said, I have a psychiatrist, I take medication, but she's good on all the other things I talk about that I've referenced with you today. So my great passion is that we could create a mental health system in Canada that is not symptom focused. The current mental health system in Canada is to stabilize a person and reduce symptoms. Well, what about quality of life? What about all of these unresolved issues of trauma, et cetera, et cetera? But nonetheless, 67% of people do experience a degree of recovery, and psychiatry is called clinical recovery. And the peer support movement is called personal recovery. And yeah, I know that there are functionality issues, impairments, and disability, but we don't have to settle for that. That's the way people are always going to be. Because when my brother Terry developed cannabis-induced psychosis, you know what the phrase was? Kiss of death diagnosis. Schizophrenia was called the kiss of death diagnosis. Well, that is no longer true, and it does not have to be. So I'm very passionate about peer support workers, and I just want to thank all of you for your passion around this. And the greatest gift that we can give people who live with schizophrenia and psychosis is not see them as a diagnostic label, but ask them, what are your hopes and your dreams and your future? And some of them will say, not much, because we as a society have not given the kind of recovery-oriented services that are possible today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chris. And I just want to say we're all very sorry to hear about your brother, and the fact that you're still here really speaks to your passion about advocating for schizophrenia, advocating for psychosis. And I love the message that you talked about, how you focus on whole purpose and meaning. There is recovery, and this is something we can all focus on, especially something I know you're spearheading in terms of changing the Canadian health system into recovery-oriented rather than just symptom-oriented. Thank you, Chris. Just like Calpit, I would just like to give everybody roughly 3 minutes to just, if you have any questions, I know my team's going to repost that link again. Post it on the link, and we'll talk through. And also, if you can, put down who you're addressing that question towards, if you have someone to address it towards, so we can kind of sort that out at the end of all the speakers. So the link is currently on the chat right now. Thanks, everyone.
Just let me say that I'll respond to one question here, and that is around cannabis and psychosis. We all have a cannabis system, so we're all guilty. You have a cannabis system in your body called the endocannabinoid system. And we didn't know much about this until cannabis became legalized. And so from the conception of human life to 25, your brain is developing. And so plant-based cannabis or THC, it doesn't work well with the endocannabinoid system in the human brain. And especially for people who have had significant mental health problems or mental illness in their family, there's 7-fold greater risk of developing psychosis. In other words, cannabis is not benign. Now, I know there's recreational use, there's spiritual use of cannabis. People use cannabis for mental health problems when they're stressed, or they have a horrible marriage. They married an ideal. The person's become an ideal, and they ask Jesus for a new deal. I hope you got that. Ideal, ordeal, new deal. And people use cannabis for a lot of reasons, what I'm trying to say here. But some people are more susceptible to the psychotic features of its use. And so part of informed decision making, which Sarah and Catherine, our project managers with our cannabis and psychosis link and our cannabis and mental health link, is to help inform young people about that it's not benign and risk, but we do it in a non-condemning way. It's informed decision making, and if you're going to use, then how to use safely and that type of thing. But a lot of people don't realize that if you have mental illness in your family history, significant mental health problems, you have about a 7-fold greater increase of developing psychosis. So I just wanted to answer that question.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. And I love the way you phrased it. Oh, I think I'm hearing my echo. So I'll just continue talking. I'm sure someone will agree with that, but I love the way you phrased it. It's informed. It's just information about cannabis and psychosis, and that link. I never realized about this link until just a few years ago. And clearly there's a strong association there. And we just heard from a speaker, Kalpit, talking about his experience with cannabis and psychosis. So definitely something you all can check out. And there's a link we will repost. We'll send everyone an email about all the links that we're talking about. But we'll also post in the chat about that course. So you or someone you care about could take that course and get more information about what this topic has to offer. So that being said, thank you once again, Chris, for that great speech about talking about your experiences, talking about your brother, talking about navigating mental health and healthcare within Canada and providing the hope for recovery. Now, the next speaker we have is Hakeem Al-Zaidi. So Hakeem is actually an Islamic motivational, inspirational speaker. Hakeem is a graduate of Royal Roads University of Victoria from BC and a BC Schizophrenia Scholarship recipient. It took Hakeem 10 years to obtain his 4-year undergraduate degree in business and sustainability. Hakeem has been dealing with schizophrenia since his early 20s. His fascination with all that is basketball mirrors his quest to take a shot after shot in his mission to speak to the uniqueness of mental illness in this world. That being said, please help me welcome Hakeem.
Oh,
Hakeem,
yeah.
we can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Mute. Oh, sorry.
We're good
I
now.
would like to acknowledge the Lekwungen and Standish Songhees First Nation, in which I work, play, and operate on. I would also like to thank the York Schizophrenia Society for having me here, and I feel honored and privileged to be here. So I'm going to try and share my screen here. It won't let me share my screen. Let's see. Oh, there you go. Okay. I am going to be speaking to you about the following. Hope is hard work. I've been primarily a dishwasher for 15 years. I had failed English 3 times. When I was first admitted to the hospital for schizophrenia, I was given an IQ of 74. I am inspired by Malcolm X. I had learned that, like me, Malcolm X cannot read or write. My English professor, Ms. Moore Walker, helped me. I finally passed English 151. I want y'all to know something. It took me 10 years to obtain a 4-year degree. I've stayed focused, I've stayed on it, and my story will highlight my struggle with schizophrenia. So when I give presentations, I typically give presentations using mini basketballs, etc., and to be engaging when I am in person. And I was born into this world with my identical twin. I'm going to get into a bit about him in a minute by showing you a video. My name is Hakeem Al-Zaidi. I am a mental illness motivation speaker. I love the sport of basketball. I was born into the world with my identical twin, Kareem Al-Zaidi. And we love basketball from a very young age. His name is Kareem, which means ever generous, honest, and kind, who means wise and intelligent. So I dedicate my presentation in the love and memory of my identical twin, Kareem Al-Zaidi, who's unfortunately is not here with me anymore. He too has schizophrenia, which his illness was much more severe. So these are photos of me and my identical twin when we were younger. We did not have that many friends when in my early 20s, so I don't have very many pictures of us all grown up. And that's a picture in the middle is of my best friend and his identical twin. And so my thoughts and prayers go out to Chris, because I can empathize a little bit with that. So I'm going to get into my story a little bit. So my twin Kareem Azayedi had schizophrenia, but his symptoms were much more severe. He often hallucinated, had delusions, and eventually got panic attacks. When he visited me from Shishelt, where we used to live, a small town, he and I would go to play basketball at the Pisces gym, where I went to college. When he was there, he often felt uncomfortable, had a lot of social anxiety, felt like he didn't belong there. He had told me that he feel that he didn't believe that he should be there on campus because he was not smart enough. I had to reassure my twin. My twin Kareem got me my first job, very first job at age 15 as a dishwasher. He also had a buddy sharing system, as he had a clubhouse next to him that supports people with mental health issues. He was better at budgeting, saving, and living within his means. I truly miss him. And unfortunately for him, his dreams of going to computer science, going to school for computer science, after seeing I was likely to graduate with a marketing diploma, was cut short on November 27th, 2015. Sharing. So I want to go into what my life looked like when I was first came to Canada. So I came to Canada from Barbados, where I was originally born. And my twin and I had moved to Canada, and we joined a high school basketball team. In Barbados, we even had a basketball court, so we knew about basketball back then. So when we came to Canada, we failed to integrate into get along with the other students, etc. And we mostly played basketball every lunchtime and played lots of video games. And we didn't have very many friends, and we did not seem to know how to navigate, being around in a different country, in a different society. Unfortunately, at some point in time, we both started to have symptoms of schizophrenia, which my twin's symptoms started at age 19. He was saying things that didn't make sense to me, and I couldn't quite understand what he was trying to say. Like it didn't make any logical sense. At that time, our parents were telling us, no, he doesn't have schizophrenia. We have to get him out the hospital, blah, blah, blah. And where I'm from, schizophrenia is the Caribbean schizophrenia is very highly, mental illness is very highly frowned upon. So when I moved to Canada, and then I became a teenager at 19, I decided that I didn't want to play video games anymore. So I stopped playing video games for 7 years after age 19. And I decided I wanted to explore other interests, try other things in life. So I decided that maybe I want to take upgrade classes. So I took upgrade grade 8 math and upgrade grade 11 English, because that's what that's what I was put at when I went back to school. And I was trying to eat healthier foods. I moved into my aunt's place from Shishalt because, it was just a small town. I didn't quite, feel like it was fulfilling living there.
So I lived in her garage for a while, and I had no issues doing that because I had no friends, and I was willing to try something new, try something out. So I started working out. I started taking my L test to get my driver's license. I started taking swimming lessons. So although I'm from Barbados, I do not know how to swim. And my aunt decided to confront me and tell me, you might want to try something different than dishwashing. So my aunt is in a wheelchair, and so she has support workers and caregivers. And they decided back then we didn't have the electronic submission of resumes. So we went literally door to door to each business, handing out my resumes, helping me hand out my resumes, helping me, try something new other than dishwashing. I eventually landed a job at Panago, which I didn't even last a day. I lasted half a day. I was extremely nervous, had high anxiety, and just was not doing well, having a good time. So I was let go, and I was embarrassed that day. However, I stuck with it, and my aunt eventually landed me a job at Pizza Hut. That job at Pizza Hut would not last very long. It will last a year, which is long, I guess, a period of time. However, symptoms of schizophrenia started showing up. And this is at the age of 20. I started to forget things, started to have delusions, etc. So it made it impossible for me to complete my jobs and tasks. And I was eventually let go from Pizza Hut. And I was telling my aunt this is devastating because I can't afford to have any setbacks, etc. What am I gonna do? I can't, help pay for food and help pay bills, etc. And I just felt like, okay, I have big dreams of going to school for kinesiology, psychology, or even marketing diploma. But here I am facing a setback. So I eventually said, nah, I'll be fine. I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. So my aunt, Joanne Dubar, president of Actions Committee for People with Disabilities, she started to notice my usual erratic behavior had escalated. My longtime hero, Aunt Joanne, had her husband Dale take me to the Eric Martin Hospital in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. These were my symptoms. I believe the TV was talking to me. I believe people were spying on me. I was extremely paranoid. I believe that graffiti was specifically written for me. I believe I had $1 million in my back pocket. I stayed in that hospital for 3 months. I was still devastated, especially in the hospital, because I had this goal of going back to school and staying on this path. And here I was ill, sick, can't do nothing, involuntary patient admission, and just devastated. I was truly, trying to change my life and trying to figure it all out at the age of 20. However, I stayed in that hospital, and after I came out of that hospital, I was given a case manager. I was given a psychiatrist. I didn't really question my diagnosis. At that time, I just knew that I had schizophrenia. But when I came out of the hospital, my symptoms of schizophrenia did not automatically go away. I will still have delusions, hallucinations. I believe, when I was working out, I would make the Olympics. I had delusional grandeur. I was extremely shy and, very mesquite, be courageous just to make a friend. But over time, period of time, my illness become more and more manageable. I met my best friends at the gym, actually. The way I met my best friend was I thought he was giving me evil eye, and he was there to beat me and fight me. So I talked to him, and I say, we had a conversation, we had a bit of a chat, and we went over for coffee, and we've been best friends since then. The biggest thing for me was being afraid to open up to my best friends or open up to my friends, and friends that didn't know at the time that I had schizophrenia. I was very reserved in sharing that I had mental illness. I was relieved that I shared my illness with my best friends and close friends. They have been very supportive. I was very shocked and surprised because normally people aren't very supportive of such things. So despite my ability to work, my ability to develop professional and personal romantic relationships, my psychotic struggle is still there today. So I refer to basketball as a metaphor for life, for me personally, because it's very dear to me. That's what my twin loves. He loves the sport of basketball. His favorite player is LeBron. So these are my 5 basketballs that can change anytime. So the anxiety, depression, remaining calm, trouble waking up due to the medication that I take, and patience. And I will add even another one, allogia. So allogia is something that I researched when I decided to become a motivational speaker. I researched my illness through experience of self and feedback from others. Allogia disrupts an individual's thought processes and leads to the absence of speech or verbal fluency. Those affected may have disorganized speech or memory, but that has nothing to do with their intelligence levels. So, like I said before, I take this medication that I absolutely dislike. I take it every day. I've tried so many things in the past several years. I've tried different alarm clocks. I've tried, I can't say the name of the device because they would come on. I've tried, wake up calls from friends and family, etc. I remember being in class in university and sitting upright, falling asleep because of my medication, and embarrassed because I was trying to pay attention and it's just not happening. I'm just stuck, falling asleep. And up to graduating university, I've managed to still graduate, thankfully. Up to this day, I think I've found a rhythm in managing the symptoms of the medications I take. So I don't know, I've came a long way. Can you imagine at the age of 20, you're diagnosed in the hospital, you're declared mentally, educationally retarded at the age of 20, despite graduating high school and being given an IQ of 74. They don't do, as far as I know, they don't do IQ tests to help determine if a person has a certain type of mental illness or schizophrenia. Because that means the person cannot form a proper sentence or read or write. So as a result of that, well, I don't know if it's a result of that, it took me 7 years to complete a marketing diploma, which includes the upgrade classes I was taking and figuring out which specialization I wanted to take. And a rationale of transferring from Camosun College to Royal Roads University was because I was tired of seeing the same professors, the same teachers, maybe even the same janitor, the same people. And I felt like I would be there forever. So I changed the scenery. 3 years later, including the scholarship from the BC Schizophrenia Society, I was able to graduate with a bachelor's degree in business. And one of the things that actually propelled me over the top in terms of being able to graduate, I saw this amazing story of Ellen Sachs, how she was studying law, etc. and she has schizophrenia, I saw that story and I never take 6 courses ever in my life. I took the 6 courses, I got A and Bs, and I finished that semester. And as a result, finished my degree on scholarship. I felt a lot of pressure because I didn't feel like I deserved that scholarship because, like I've never won a scholarship before. So I was like, I saw the video of this person sharing their story. I was able to graduate. So I just want to say, typically, if not identified early as possible, the illness, schizophrenia, can have negative, long-lasting effects. So like me and others with the illness, this includes negatively affecting social and professional development long-term. The impact is on a young person's sense of identity, relationship goals, and educational goals, all of which can be permanently damaged. So I just want to say a quote here as I finish sharing my brief story. When the I in mental illness replaced by we, even mental illness becomes mental illness. So what does my life look like right now? I'm a motivational and inspirational speaker. I am advocating for schizophrenia and mental health for all, but especially in my faith, Islam, which in my faith, it's highly shunned upon mental illness, let alone schizophrenia, let alone mental health. And this is something that I'm advocating and working with others upon in the community to not be so afraid to talk about. And currently, my current job is I'm a program administrative assistant for the BC Legislative Assembly. I'm actually presenting on mental health for work learn day. And so I'm a former IT assistant for the Ministry of Finance, and I do peer support periodically for those who are unsheltered and homeless for a nonprofit. And I been a podcast series with the BC Schizophrenia Society in 2021 and the scholarship. So I just want to say another few words in terms of something I wrote or a concept I came up with, because it was inspired by the article BC Schizophrenia Society featured me in. I hope you hear the words, "You are amazing." I hope you hear the words, "You are talented." I hope you hear the words, "You're smart." I hope you hear the words that you need right now in order for you to get through the day, whatever the case may be. So I said this presentation, hope is hard work. I shared it on the 14th of 2023 at the Jamia Mosque in Richmond, BC, British Columbia, Canada. The first time BC Schizophrenia Society was ever in a mosque. A lot of the other mental health organizations had difficulty in the mosque. It took me 7 months to convince them to let me speak there. And I actually give a t-shirt in which we all sign to what does mental health mean to you, how you feeling, whatever you want to write. Unfortunately for me that day, it was the first time me presenting in such a big mosque, and I forgot to share other stories that they had given me to share for them because they're not too outspoken or good at want to be good at public speaking. So that was unfortunate. So I'm going to share a YouTube video of how I give a presentation. Yes, exactly. Yes. So Yeah. So I'm also working with I've managed to network with people from America, people from the States. I've been on a recent podcast today about is how to build a product at scale for people. My apologies. So I'm working with other people in America, other people, and even the UK on how we can better support those with mental health issues within the Islamic faith, because it's very taboo, it's highly shunned upon, etc. So I'm working with my friend Faye Hitter from Minnesota. She's a government advisory counselor for opioid substance use and addiction in Minnesota. So it's not because you can have co-concurrent um, uh, mental health issues. So you can have schizophrenia and still be using substance. So I just wanted to say one more thing. So yeah, I'm going to say, I'm not, my illness will always be there. And what I do right now, I take my medications. I take vitamin B, D3, D3, K2 drops. I take I eat healthy. I try to eat as healthy as possible, and I exercise. So I play basketball, and I lift with weights here and there now because I'm very busy, and I'm more working towards being a servant leader, so concerned with serving others in the community, working on my empathy, working on my delusional grandeur, etc. And people, when they typically try to advise people with schizophrenia, often include their own bias on what success will look like for them. So I offer you this. Everyone is different. Everyone's environment, upcoming, etc., it will look different for everyone, and recovery will look different for everyone. And that's why I'm going to say my very last piece. I promise. I hope to have humility, modesty, treating everyone with kindness and respect. Everyone is worthy of kindness and respect. Given an IQ of 74. When I was severely ill with schizophrenia, I hope I have a growth mindset. I hope I never have an aspect of arrogance. You see the homeless person, the janitor, the dishwasher, the cashier, whoever it may be, whether they're CEO of a company, whether they're a doctor or a lawyer, everyone is deserving of kindness and respect. So you missed a shot. You missed a shot at getting into college. You missed a shot at getting that job bagging groceries at the grocery store. You missed a shot at being a dishwasher. You missed a shot at, I don't know, getting to grad school. You missed a shot at med school. Whatever the case may be, take the shot again. Your shot at med school. Your shot at being a stand-up comedian. Your shot at open mic. Your shot at law school. Your shot at your first business ever. Your shot at your first clothing line. You inspire, you are a champion, and whatever that looks like for you, wherever the case may be, and I hope that you be successful in what that looks like for you, etc. So feed the hungry, visit a sick person, and free the captive if he be unjustly confined. Assist any person oppressed, whether Muslim or non-Muslim. Prophet, peace be upon him, Muhammad. And that ends my presentation today.
Thank you so much, Hakeem. This was such a wonderful presentation. I just want to say you're amazing, you're talented, and you're intelligent. This is very brave of you to talk about all these things, about the effects of medication can have, about and about your brother. I'm very sorry to hear about that. and about your whole experience navigating this illness. So thank you so much. Thank you for putting yourself out there. It's very much appreciated. And for everyone else, similar to what we talked about with Chris and Calpit, my team is going to once again share the link again. Please ask any questions for Hakeem, and put your name up, put who is it going towards as well, so kind of make it easier. Or if you want to talk to all the speakers, that's completely fine as well. So here, the link is back on. I'll give everybody, let's say 3 minutes. So 7:41, we will get started again. Thanks, everyone. I just want to say once again, thank you so much, Hakeem. This was such a wonderful speech about your experience in talking about mental illness and your experience with medications and your whole journey. It's wonderful, it's brave, and on behalf of everyone, thank you. Now, our last and final speaker, I'm sure many of us have, if you've come across the topic of schizophrenia, you've done any research, I'm sure you've come across her videos. I've personally looked at her videos as well when my family member was going through schizophrenia, and it really helped me identify like, what I can do, what is this illness, and really it's because of her videos about this and talking about actual experiences. So our next guest is Lauren West. Lauren West is actually a social worker who was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder in 2016 at the age of 25. She has become a prominent voice in mental health and schizophrenia advocacy through her YouTube channel, Living Well with Schizophrenia, which has garnered over 20 million views. She offers a unique perspective, blending both her experience as a patient and navigating the system, and as a mental health professional. With that being said, please help me welcome Lauren West.
Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here with the Schizophrenia Society of York and all of you this evening. So thanks so much for having me. My name is Lauren Kennedy West, and I live with schizoaffective disorder. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's basically a combination of schizophrenia and a major mood disorder. So for me, it's bipolar disorder. As you may know, schizophrenia is an illness that causes the individual to lose touch with reality, and it generally involves symptoms such as hallucinations and delusions, as well as negative symptoms, including reduced motivation, emotional flatness, and those sorts of things. Bipolar disorder is an illness that causes extreme mood swings that include emotional highs, so mania or hypomania, and lows, so depression. So when I was first diagnosed, one of the places that I turned to first for more information was, of course, the internet and YouTube in particular. But I was left feeling rather alone, as I didn't really, find many others sharing their experiences or patient-centered knowledge and information about what it means to live with the illness. It was for this reason that I decided to create the resource that I had originally been seeking out. And so my partner Rob and I created the YouTube channel Living Well with Schizophrenia in late 2018 with the intention of helping those living with schizophrenia spectrum illnesses to feel less alone and to build more empathy in the general population about what it really means to live with an illness like schizophrenia. So I honestly never really expected much to come of it. And so I was over the moon when our first video sharing my story reached, I think it was like 12 people. Much to my surprise, our channel seemed to really resonate with people as it began to grow quite quickly. We currently have about 200,000 subscribers and over 20 million views on YouTube. We have also created an online peer support platform for people who are living with and supporting those experiencing schizophrenia spectrum illnesses. It has been really incredible to see this peer support model grow and thrive over the last year, and it has become a really valuable resource for people touched by schizophrenia. Before I began sharing my personal story and advocacy work on YouTube, I worked as a social worker and researcher in the mental health spheres. I have authored several peer-reviewed articles on bettering the delivery of mental health care and a frontline experience as a social worker. So that's kind of a brief summary of who I am in relation to my experience working in mental health care and advocacy. I would love to now share with you parts of my story. So I suppose I should begin by talking briefly about my childhood, as a lot of people ask about my childhood, expecting it to be troubled in some way, but it really wasn't for the most part. I lived with my mom, dad, and brother, and I had friends. I was definitely a little quieter than most and got lost in my own head a lot, but I was really happy. I loved school and I was very active in extracurriculars such as competitive gymnastics, soccer, and various volunteer work. But then in high school, my state of mind began to kind of shift. And I was no longer this happy young person. I became much more withdrawn. I lost interest in school and just kind of generally felt adrift. After high school, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so kind of limped into post-secondary. I was very bothered by the world, though, and my role or lack thereof in it, and I began to feel extreme sadness and despondency. I explained some of these sentiments to my family doctor and was prescribed antidepressants. I took them for a while, but gave up on them shortly after, as I didn't really feel they were having much of an impact. I managed to graduate from my first undergraduate program, and in 2013 went back to university again to pursue an after degree in social work. My first semester in the new program, my headspace became so depressed and confused that I realized that I needed additional support. And so I sought out counseling through the university. I had no idea, though, how to engage in therapy, and so the kind of awkwardness and silent disposition I had developed in the years since high school kind of bled through into these interactions as well. My counselor, though, decided that I needed further support, and so connected me with a GP and a psychiatrist through the university as well. It's really hard for me to put into words how grateful I am that I had these individuals all trying to help and support me. However, despite this support, I was still feeling intense despair, and my headspace deteriorated to the point where I felt the only option I had was to take my own life. I made an attempt on my life in January 2014 at the age of 22. So it's not the right wording to use to say that I wasn't successful, but regardless, I was not successful in taking my own life, and I ended up hospitalized for the first time. When I got out of the hospital, I was filled with despair at the realization that not only was I unsuccessful, but being hospitalized hadn't really helped at all. The next year was a huge struggle trying to keep up with schoolwork while seeing my care team pretty well daily. I kept sliding further and further into despair. 1 year after my first attempt, I decided that it was my best option to try to end my life again. Now, obviously, I was unsuccessful again, but I came much closer this time. I hadn't said a word about my plans to my counselor, but for some reason, he had a feeling that something was off, and he decided to send the police to do a wellness check on me. They found me just in time to rush me to the hospital, where I ended up on life support for several days. But waking up in the hospital this time was absolutely crushing. All of the same feelings as the last time came rushing back, but also this time I was filled with embarrassment too, that I had now been unsuccessful in taking my life twice. It felt like I couldn't really escape this cycle. Throughout the next year, I continued to try various types of medication and medical interventions, such as electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, with minimal positive effects and just kind of plenty of negative side effects. During this time, I also began to experience new symptoms, which I later identified as hallucinations. So it started with olfactory hallucinations, where I would smell these really terrible smells that I couldn't identify and I couldn't locate the source of. I ended up convinced that I just smelled really, really bad. I also began to hear voices, and they started out with me hearing my name just spoken aloud. I would just brush this off initially, and the subsequent chatter that followed, thinking that I could just hear conversations that were going on around me. However, it began happening even when I was completely alone. These new symptoms confused and frightened me, so I never let my care team know about them at the time. I could feel myself deteriorating mentally even further, and in March 2016, at 24, I had my first manic episode. I became fixated on the idea that my care team was hiding something from me and secretly trying to harm me. I fought the medical clinic to gain access to my medical files and just kind of obsessively pored over them, believing that I was finding secret clues and connections that would lead me closer to figuring out what was going on. My boyfriend at the time was starting to wonder if something more serious was going on, and after finding me sleeping in my car outside of the medical clinic one night, he decided to try to get me to go to the hospital with him. He was really, really great at focusing on validating the feelings that I was experiencing and being really empathic about that, rather than focusing on negating the delusional thoughts that I was having. I think this was a really big part of what made me trust him in taking me to the hospital. I spent another couple of weeks in the hospital and eventually stabilized somewhat, and this time was slapped with the diagnosis of bipolar disorder with psychotic features. Upon reflection, this made a bit of sense, as I had definitely experienced deep depression, and I realized I had also experienced hypomania too. I had these pockets of periods during my early 20s where I would go off on adventures, traveling or running in the mountains, pushing myself physically and feeling, I suppose you could call it, a zest for life. I graduated that spring of 2016 and landed my dream job doing cancer care research in Toronto. I was thrilled about this and feeling like maybe I was beginning to see a light. So, on paper, it seemed like I was doing really, really well. So I had just graduated from my second degree program, landed a great job in a city I wanted to live in. I had a loving long-term boyfriend and some close friendships. However, this seeming period of stability lasted less than 3 months, and that summer my world came crashing down. I did not account in my move how difficult it would be to get connected with a new care team in the new city. I was told the only way I could get connected with a psychiatrist was to go through a family physician. However, I couldn't find any physicians who were taking on new clients. I eventually just decided it wasn't going to happen. I was struggling mentally so much, though, that I had to resign from my new job and move back home to Alberta, where I had initially grew up. I was devastated. This move back home also coincided with the ending of my relationship. It was very amicable, but still another blow at the time. When I moved back home, I was finally able to get in with a new family physician. He connected me with a psychiatrist who I could only see 6 times, though. I decided to be more honest about all of the symptoms that I was experiencing, and that I was experiencing what I now know were psychotic symptoms on a pretty regular basis. He diagnosed me with schizoaffective disorder. On some level, this diagnosis felt good to receive, as it felt like a relief that what I was experiencing could finally be attributed to something. However, I was also left feeling lost and scared, as there really are not a lot of success stories being shared about people living with schizophrenia spectrum illnesses. Almost everything we hear in the news or in popular media are very negative and stigmatized depictions of schizophrenia. And so this sense of loss was kind of compounded with the fact that I was still getting worse as well. My psychotic symptoms continued to worsen that fall, and I ended up in the hospital for just over a month this time. This hospitalization was kind of a truly horrific experience. So first of all, I was brought to the hospital in handcuffs from my psychiatrist's office. I became terrified being locked in a sterile white concrete brick room and began to kind of lose my cool. And so I was subsequently accosted by hospital staff and tied down by my hands, feet, and chest to a metal gurney while they injected me with antipsychotic medication and something to sedate me. This hospital stay, unfortunately, really only got worse, and one time while admitted in the psychiatric institution, I was dragged into an isolation room and pinned down by 6 men, both nursing staff and security, stripped naked and injected with medications again. They left me naked in this room that alarmingly had a window in the door where other patients and staff could walk by and see me naked. I found myself yelling and pounding on the door for them to give me my clothes back. They eventually gave me a blanket, but realizing that I was now that, crazy psych ward patient lashing out was kind of a lot to take in. This hospital stay left me traumatized and with a rather deep distrust of the medical system. I was finally being treated, though, for the right thing and began to see some slight improvements. The next couple of years saw me float in and out of jobs due to my mental health, but more importantly, I was slowly rebuilding my life in the sense of trying to strengthen relationships, and most especially my relationship with myself. I put in a lot of work trying to build up self-acceptance and self-compassion and love. I met my now husband in 2018, and, long story short, we fell in love, moved in together, and got engaged. He also had 2 kids who I fell also in love with and became mom too. It felt like things were going really, really quite amazingly. With things feeling like they were going so well, I began to question whether or not I really needed medication. So I began to be less structured in taking them, and this led me to follow more delusional thoughts about the medications being poisonous, which led me to completely stop taking them. And I don't think it's hard to imagine that this did not end well. I became extremely delusional and very paranoid, and my delusional thoughts had spiraled into full-on psychosis. And Rob, my partner, not really knowing how to manage things, called the police to take me to the hospital. The cops who responded and ended up taking me to the hospital were kind of stark differences. One of them took a very authoritative, aggressive approach with me and even went so far as getting physical, shoving me into a chair at one point. He was very threatening and made the whole encounter a very hostile one. I was already really, really terrified, and I'm sure you can imagine how this made me feel even worse. But in contrast, his partner tried to take a much softer approach and tried to actually talk with me and empathize with how I was feeling in that moment. She actually shared that she knew who I was because I had gone to speak to her recruits class about my experiences navigating the mental health care system as someone living with schizoaffective disorder. Despite her partner, she helped me understand that I needed to go to the hospital. So I ended up in the hospital for 2 weeks this time, and given my traumatic history with hospitals, it wasn't terribly helpful, but did help to stabilize me back on medications. I think, though, that it was having a family and going through this that pushed me to realize the importance of working as hard as I can on my wellness. And now I think it's important to clarify that wellness is not exactly a choice with this illness. However, there are factors that can promote wellness that I tried to adhere to. So I focused on things like building in more routine into my life, which was somewhat upended by the dawn of a global pandemic, but I tried nevertheless. I tried to focus on eating well and exercising regularly, nurturing my relationships, and just trying to take care of myself as best as possible. So Rob and I got married in August 2020, and a few days later found out that I was pregnant too. The pregnancy was a difficult experience for me, and it definitely impacted my mental health. And I suppose this may have been compounded by being more isolated due to the pandemic as well. I had initially wanted to reduce and ideally go off my psychiatric medications entirely when I found out that I was pregnant, but very quickly realized that this wasn't going to be possible. I discussed with my psychiatrist how to reduce the potential risks to the baby due to the medications I was on as much as possible, and we found a medication regimen that worked for me and that I felt relatively safe on while carrying a child. So I gave birth to my beautiful, sweet baby boy, Theodore, on April 12th, 2021. And we all kind of fell quickly in love with him, and he has been such a wonderful addition to our family over the last 2 years. Navigating life, though, with 2 older kids, an infant, although now I guess a toddler, and keeping up with life and work has presented its challenges for my mental health. However, since Theodore was born, I have felt the most stable I think I ever have. I've read that becoming a mother can be a protective factor for those living with schizophrenia, and I am absolutely experiencing that. So I've continued to speak with my psychiatrist every month or two or as needed by phone throughout the pandemic and ongoing still. I also saw my therapist, who I see privately every month through video chat, though now back to in-person as well. Going through all of these experiences and also exploring my diagnosis and my experiences of living with schizoaffective disorder through our YouTube channel have really allowed me to understand the importance of self-advocacy when navigating the mental health care system. It all has also been really instrumental in working towards a place of more self-acceptance. I feel more at peace now with the fact that I live with schizoaffective disorder, and I feel I have a better grip on it and a better understanding of how to manage it now and how to advocate for proper care. I don't doubt that I will experience setbacks and more difficult periods down the line as a result of my illness, and I definitely am not symptom-free on a day-to-day basis either. I still experience breakthrough symptoms such as hallucinations, delusions, and paranoia. However, I feel a lot more grounded in managing these aspects than I used to, and for the most part, my medication and self-care regimens really help to keep them at bay too. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening to my story, and I can't wait to answer any questions you may have in the Q&A portion coming up.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I think I speak for everybody. Your story is it really shows us like what's happening with individuals who are diagnosed with schizophrenia. And you're talking about your stay at hospitals and how traumatic it could be. It really shows like everyone here that the potential of what things can happen when you do go to the hospital, when you do call the police, what the potentials are there. I'm so glad that you're sharing your story on YouTube too, but there were not just anybody in Canada, but people all over the world are using your video as a resource to understand what it actually means to have this illness, not just the clinical side, but actually each person. As Chris said, that you meet one person with schizophrenia, you meet one person with schizophrenia. And it's amazing that you're sharing your story and providing this resource for everybody here.
Thanks for having
Thank you,
me.
Lauren. Thank you, Lauren. I will allow, let's do another 2 minutes or so for questions, but right after that, we'll get started with questions. And I will have the form here. There's two. So for the questions, how this is going to work is, if you have a question, you want to talk live using your video or audio, just put up your hand and then my team will unmute you and you can go ahead. Or I will go over the questions that you have already submitted through the form and I will ask them for you. So let's do until 7:59 and then we'll get started with the questions. Thanks, everyone.
So we have Suzanne, her hand's raised, so she's going to speak now, asking a question.
Oh, I'm the first one. Thank you. So, my gosh, it's I now that I'm starting to speak, I'm just like sort of feeling the sort of the emotion that has come up, I guess, as everyone's spoken and shared their stories. Yeah, it's a lot to take in. I appreciate everyone being so open. My brother has schizophrenia. So my family's been, exposed to it to his experience for quite a long time and ours. And so what I was really wondering about, like I have to admit, I love these events. I love the idea that hearing from people who have lived experience, I realize that it is a very heterogeneous experience. It's not the same between any two people. And having said that, there's a lot of experiences that are very, very similar. There are, the feeling that voices are speaking to you directly, or that certain messages are being delivered, and the paranoia, and, the symptoms that we all kind of know and identify as sort of part of psychosis, right? And so I'm just like, so I'm 44, my brother's 49. And so when I see these talks, I notice that everyone's quite a bit younger, and it seems to be that a lot of people have these sort of recovery stories, and it seems to have been caught at a later time. And so, like, I don't know, my question, I'm trying to formulate my exact question, but essentially it's like, Lauren, you mentioned that your husband ended up calling the police, right? So that's something as a family member, like, I don't want to do to my brother, but at the same time, he's very ill, right? And his quality of life is struggling, suffering tremendously. So I guess what I'm wondering is, like, as a person who's seeing it from the outside, like, do you guys have any thoughts about, like, what's the best way to help somebody? Or, like, how like, these stories sort of seem to all speak to, like, early experiences, but, like, what about somebody who, I don't know if you are all familiar with the term anosognosia, but somebody who just seems to have zero awareness of the negative impacts that are happening, and that they have symptoms at all, like, then what? That's what my brain goes to when I see these talks and when I hear them. And I'm just wondering if anybody has any thoughts to, especially the speakers and the people with lived experience, but anybody for that matter, about that issue or that situation.
Thanks for sharing about you and your brother. I worry sometimes when I'm presenting my story that it is communicating that, like, I'm recovered and, this, like, I've reached an endpoint in my illness where I'm okay. Like, there's a degree of that to my story, but it is also an ongoing struggle, and it's something that you need to be continuously working on. And things like anosognosia are very real things that I too experience to this day. And so what's been helpful for me is having someone who I trust in my life. For me, that's my partner. Perhaps that's you for your brother, there to just keep talking about it with me, regardless of the state I'm in. And hopefully there are periods where I can accept and hear you know, that we're having a conversation about the impacts that this illness has and about my desires. You know, you mentioned not wanting to call the police on your brother. So if you can have conversations about what he wants to happen in a situation where there's things that you guys feel you don't have control of anymore, you need external support, and getting to share common ground with him about what he's wanting as well. And so it's more of a collaborative process rather than just having to call the police in a moment of crisis.
Yeah, thank you. My brother doesn't have any awareness, and his delusions tend to focus on me, and he doesn't connect with anyone. He won't speak to he doesn't trust anyone. So it's really, we don't know how to help. It's and you know, and I do research on cognition with the homeless population, and I interview many people who have the same thing. Like, they'll talk to me about their experiences, and they're meeting all the criteria for psychosis, but yet they're telling me they don't have it, that these things are happening.
That's very common for people with schizophrenia to not accept. So it takes a while for some people to accept. I eventually accepted, and it was only through like Lauren was saying, correction, you know, fans and family that care about the individual, talking to them and helping them.
I imagine lots of other people have questions. So just before maybe we wrap this one up, I just wanted to share with the group that for my undergraduate thesis, I did a study. I've been connected with several organizations who support people, family members specifically, who have relatives with serious mental illness, and so for my research, my undergraduate thesis, we did a study on stigma experienced by those family members as a consequence of having a relative with serious mental illness. And we actually were supported by the Institute for Advancements in Mental Health, which was formerly the Ontario Schizophrenia Society of Ontario, and also by SSY. We recruited participants through them, and that research was recently published. So a huge thank you to those people for their support. And maybe I'll throw a link in the chat in case anybody's interested in the article.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Suzanne. And your work that you do is very impactful. And the research is what kind of drives this field forward, so we can understand more about schizophrenia from the clinical side, but also from the caregiving side. How does it affect people who are supporting them? I think many people here that don't have schizophrenia, they might be indirectly affected by having a family member like yourself, myself, and several other people here. Thank you, Suzanne, for your questions. Those were great.
Thank you.
I believe Saeed had a question. So Saeed, if you want to speak up.
Sure. Thank you so much to everyone, all the organizers and speakers who put together this event. I'm a third-year cognitive science student at York. My uncle has suffered from schizophrenia for 40 years. He lives on the streets of New York. He suffers from both symptoms of paranoid and disorganized schizophrenia. And one problem in my community, I'm Pakistani. Originally, our family is Indian. After the partition, half of the family fled and half the family stayed in India. My uncle was one of the ones who stayed in India, suffered severe trauma. And that, coupled with the stigma that's heavy in Islamic culture and also in East Indian culture, has given rise to this almost like this prevalence I've noticed in our community of schizophrenia and neuroatypicality in general, but then also shunning from the people that are supposed to be supporting them. So it's like this double-edged sword of higher prevalence and then also less support. And I noticed there's a diverse array of speakers and people who are kind of like forging the way towards more awareness and more treatment. But how important is the biological, psychological, spiritual, and societal factors when approaching? Because frankly, when someone calls the cops on my uncle, the cops are not friendly, right? And a lot of times it has to do with the way he looks, right? He's an older brown male. And he's not privileged to have, to be greeted with compassion, right? Unfortunately. So, part of my studies, I'm considering either pursuing psychology and cognitive science or getting into the law, because we need legal representation for these folks, right? If that's what has to happen, that's what we need to do. But my question is, how important are these biosocial psycho factors when medical professionals and legal professionals and policymakers are addressing these folks and setting up treatment and recovery programs for these people, and what can we do to kind of spearhead these initiatives? I'm not saying like certain people deserve better treatment than others. I just feel like some of us are forgotten, and the biological and psycho and social factors are not being raised at all, really. So that wasn't directed to any particular panelist, but if anyone wants to speak up, I'm really interested and frankly a bit disturbed and troubled by the lack of talk in this sphere.
Lauren, you're muted.
We can't hear you, Lauren.
Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I was just saying, I think you brought up a really good point, and a really big problem in the current mental health care system, and I guess just society in general. I'm very, very aware that as a white, well-presenting female, I have been privileged in the care that I have received. And I know that a lot of my experiences, even though some were traumatic, would have looked very different if I was a large male of color or someone like that, who would have probably been received a lot differently. And so I don't know if I can really speak to that as well as the other panelists can speak to that, because they would have firsthand experience as minority individuals in the mental health care system. But I do definitely talk a lot on our YouTube channel about privilege and how it creates a lot of different experiences for people within the mental health care system that really are not super fair.
I can't really speak for the others, but what I can say is for myself, I'm a person of color, and when I pursued help for my problems, I didn't receive any sort of prejudice or uh, sort of discrimination from my healthcare providers. And this may be because I pursued it while I was in Canada. If I was in a different country, maybe the situation might have been different. So all I can say that I'm grateful for Canada and for CAMH, for CMHA as well, for providing me that help that they did without really, taking color into consideration and treating me as an equal.
I haven't really experienced any discrimination in terms of getting treatment and therapy, but probably unrelated, but as a Black male, I guess you can say, when I wear my Islamic turban clothing, I have received significantly higher discrimination from society than usual. Just because it's pretty obvious sometimes when I wear my Islamic garment. So but I do know there is discrimination that does happen. I should correct myself. I did had instances, which I don't want to talk about it openly, with the mental health, where it was discriminatory, but it was discriminatory due to faith, I believe. Yeah.
Thank you for those responses, guys. Next up is TJ. So could you just please unmute yourself? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. So Joseph, you can go ahead.
Sure, thank you. So my father had schizophrenia, as well as bipolar disorder. In the case in which the person with schizophrenia is like a loved one, and their characteristics start becoming like they go beyond delusions and hallucinations, and now this person starts to become very violent and aggressive, and they start to turn on you, and then they start to believe, even their family is out to kill them or get them, and potentially even their children, like only 10 years of age, is now trying to kill him, because my dad never got medicated because he refused to see any therapists, and he also thought that the meds were poison or would kill him, as well as being extremely aggressive and sometimes even very dangerous and violent. Like at that point, what exactly do you do? Like would the best choice be to try and help this person who could potentially hurt you, or do you, or just is there nothing you can do at that point to try and help a person who doesn't have the insight they need, and someone who ultimately refuses help at the cost of your own safety? Like is there nothing you could potentially do to help them or help that person? Are they just lost forever if they don't have insight, if they never receive it?
I don't believe that a person would be lost forever, but this is a really difficult and really individual question where you really need to balance your safety and boundaries in the situation and taking care of yourself in the context of taking care of your loved one. And so as much as you can do for them while still honoring your own boundaries and well-being is great. I think, what was the first part of your question? You talked about not being able to gain insight and being a danger. And I think one of the really big realities of navigating this illness is that working on self-acceptance and coming to develop insight that you need to take medications potentially, or that you need to do XYZ to maintain wellness, is a long and kind of arduous process that the individual kind of needs to go through themselves. And so as much as you can support them in that process is wonderful, but it is something that they kind of need to come to a realization of on their own terms as well.
Thank you.
I would just like to follow up on that question to Lauren. I know during your presentation, you talked about how your boyfriend at the time was kind of validating your delusions at the time. So when someone's going through an episode where they have, delusional grandiosity or whatever it may be, certain delusions, what approach do you think? I know people kind of mentioned it as well, but do you think validating somebody and then trying to come from that angle, do you think that's a potential way to kind of maybe calm down the situation and then talk to them afterwards? Like what kind of approach? I know it's different, but what kind of approach would you be preferred to kind of be taken with you from a loved one, maybe from your husband? And this goes to all speakers as well.
I think the really important thing here is not to validate the delusions, but rather how the person is feeling. And so if they are feeling like, oh, the sky is purple, it's really distressing to me, I believe the sky is purple, and I'm feeling really scared and confused about that. Do not say, oh, yeah, the sky is purple. Say, that's not what I'm experiencing right now, but that sounds like that would be really scary and confusing, or talking about how they're feeling about it and validating in that way, as opposed to getting wrapped up in the delusional thinking and whatnot that's going on. Really focus on validating how the person is feeling and working on figuring out how to move out of that negative feeling if it's negative, or how to move forward with that delusional thinking still in place, but just how to move forward beyond it so that they can feel safer or better.
Yeah, that makes sense. So validating their feelings, but not their delusions itself. That makes sense. Hakeem, Kalpit, any thoughts on this?
I completely agree with what Lauren has just said. I experienced the same things with my family. Not same things, but like similar things with my family. And I realized what my family and what my case manager Tom at that time did was validate my feelings. And that's when you feel the most heard. And that is when you receive the most support. And that is when you start trusting the people again, because uh, psychosis not only distorts your reality, it also distorts the trust that you have with your peers, your family members, and everyone around you. So I feel, just as what Lauren said, just validating the feelings really helps you build that trust again.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so when I when my twin had panic attacks, I was confused because I've never heard of panic attacks before. So just listening to the person and being empathetic goes along with. Especially, I learned that as a peer support worker, and I recently learned a lot more about not just being empathetic and listening. Like Lauren was saying, don't validate the actual delusions and hallucinations, but validating the feelings, right? So when I'm listening to someone as a peer support worker, I'm listening to lend an ear, etc. But not imposing and giving my bias. Oh, that's stupid. That's silly. I never use negative self-talk. So I try to use as much positive self-talk as possible that the person I can give the person, and helping them navigate reality. So sometimes you may have to ease into the conversation, feel how the conversation is going, to really help them relate to what they're trying to say.
Thank you, Kalpit, Hakeem. These are wonderful points, and makes sense taking that positive approach, trying to relate to what they're trying to say, trying to relate to what they're feeling is a great approach, I think. Yeah. Suzanne's hands up.
I'm on mute. Sorry, I was talking on mute. I just wanted to share with Joseph that that question is one that, came up for me and continues to come up for me. And one of the organizations that I connected with that runs a family support group, it's called Reconnect Family Health Services. And they have a program called FAME, and it stands for Family Association for Mental Health Everywhere. And it's like I started going to a peer support group through there, but I also worked with this woman named Mary, who's been pivotal. She's a social worker. Go social workers. And okay, so I just everything everyone's talking about, I just have to give a shout out to this book if my computer will let me. I don't know if anyone knows this book. It's called I'm Not Sick and I Don't Need Help. It's by Xavier Amador. And it basically talks about a lot of the things that everybody's sort of talking about right now, about listening, empathizing, agreeing with what you can agree on, but not the things that you don't, right? And then partnering with people to help as much as you can. And then for me, the hard reality has been, and I'm starting in clinical psychology at 44 years old because I've lived this life, and I'm still determined to try to see if there's another way. But at this point, my brother, his delusions focus on me. He's become really aggressive with me. And so I stick around whenever he's not in that place. I am there, I am listening, I'm empathizing, I'm doing whatever I can. But when he goes to that place, that's when I have to take care of myself because he's not open to me. Right. So I think that's my experience. Everybody's got their own unique experience, but in my experience, it's, you can do so much, but even if you're doing all the right things, it may not work. And then, you have to think about when it's hurting you more than, is reasonable for you or is safe for you, right? So I just wanted to share that because I just feel like I've lived this for a really long time, and I know a lot of people here have as well, but that's some of the support that I've found really useful. I don't know if you're in Toronto, but same do online groups too. And yeah, and it doesn't always get us where we want to be, but I'm just having like, you can't always get what you want, but sometimes you can at least get what you need, right? Like, and that's sort of how I feel with this, is like, anyway, that's my ramble.
Well, thank you so much, Suzanne. And I relate with you in terms of that book. I actually read that book as well a couple of years ago, and it's amazing. It's amazing. It changed my whole perspective on how to approach somebody with schizophrenia and with the delusions. Yeah, prior to that, it would be, you would end up in almost a confrontation because you're almost rejecting their reality. But this is it's a really good book, and thank you for bringing that up. And also, if you can just put that family support group, a link to that or something in the group chat, we can repost it from SSY's Instagram, and we can get the word out there, because I don't think that's talked about enough as well. From the family side, how does it feel like to take care of somebody who's going through this, and support for them as well, right? We're directly and indirectly affected by schizophrenia. So then, thank you so much for the questions.
Thank you.
Tracy, go ahead. Oh, but actually, before I continue here, I just want to let everybody know it's 8:24 right now. We will be closing all the questions. I'm sorry we didn't have enough time for all the questions. We had a lot of great questions, a lot of discussions here. We'll be closing the questions at around 8:30. If you have more questions, please send it to us, and we can always reach out to the speakers, and if they're able to respond, we can maybe post it or submit it back to you, whatever we can. And we do have a recording here as well. If you want to rewatch something, please contact us, and we'll be able to do that. So go ahead, Tracy. Okay. I'm not hearing anything from Tracy at the moment. I'm just going to go to some of the chat questions here. So one question that popped up here is, how can we support someone who is off their medication? I know some of you all actually face the situation. How do you support someone who stopped taking the medications, and I guess potentially help them kind of go back on it, or however you can? How would you support someone going through that? For all speakers here.
I guess it depends on how severely they are experiencing the symptoms. If they are in touch with a psychiatrist at that moment. Apart from that, there are many other things that you can do to take care of your mental health, such as mindfulness-based meditation. That really helps with your mental health, and getting good sleep, working out, eating healthy. If you combine all these factors, I'm not saying for sure, but at that point, maybe because medication is really helpful, but some people just choose not to take it, and that's their choice completely. But if you're choosing not to take medication, what I would say is to do the rest of these things, as I mentioned, at least, so you're not going back. And another thing, if you stop taking medication, is that once you start taking medication again, is that you potentially might have to take a higher dosage of the medication. So it's always good to keep that in mind when you're stopping or getting off medication. It's always good to have informed decisions, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, thank you, Kalpit.
I just want to echo what Kalpit said about, other ways that you can manage the illness as well that are beneficial. But if you really believe that that person needs to be on medication, like something that happens regularly for me is I fall into delusional thinking about my medication and think that I don't need it or think that it's poisonous or something like that. When I'm stable, I understand the benefits that the medication can provide me, but when I'm in a more psychotic state, I don't always understand that. And something that's really beneficial for me from my support people, primarily my partner, is making sure I still feel that it's my choice at the end of the day and really honoring that it's up to me and I have that autonomy, but working on having a conversation with me and really trying to feel out, okay, well, what are the benefits of medication and what are the risks, what historically has happened when you've gone off medication, and just being available to talk me through those sorts of things, but ultimately it being my decision at the end of the day, and supporting that is what helps me make the decision to then take it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Giving you the autonomy to make a decision. Understand. Hakeem, any thoughts on this?
I don't really experience not being able not taking medications anymore. I can't really speak to others' experience necessarily. I do know that managing schizophrenia doesn't stop. Recovery doesn't stop. Like recovery is long term. So that's one of the key takeaways I hope that people take from these today's talks, because that's why I still needed to be reminded sometimes that, hey, Hakeem, it's probably better to take your medication at a specific time each day.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hakeem, thank you so much. We'll have 29. So we'll have one last question from Manur.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to ask Lauren, because she did mention her routine and her having a stable medication that is good for her, and how it helps her. So I just want to touch on psychologically, the regime that you have. How do you differentiate between the alter thoughts and the delusions, and how do you stop yourself from completely not indulging in those? And is there any support that helps you, or psychologically, more in your mind, and how you're able to just separate your thoughts, and how you're able to not completely go into that and not be able to come out of it? So there's a real world, and then there's the the delusion. So yeah, just the regime that you have.
Yeah, so I don't know if I have a great answer to that, unfortunately, because sometimes it is hard to do that. I think when I find myself really slipping into delusional thinking, or kind of losing touch with reality and not feeling super grounded, what really helps is to vocalize it to someone I trust. Usually, again, it's my partner. And just being able to get it out of my body in that way, and then to be able to have a bit more of a critical or questioning perspective on what it is that I'm falling into repetitive thoughts around, and he'll be able to give input on that as well. I think something else that really helps me to just kind of stabilize my thoughts is running. It's something that I really, really love, and I've gotten really into running in the past, 10 years or whatever, and it's something that for me puts me into a more kind of meditative flow state, and I'm able to really clear my head a little bit more through that. It's something that I'm really passionate about, and so I think that's something that I really encourage people to do, is find something for them like running, or whatever it is for you specifically that puts you into that state where you can reground yourself. And I think that grounding is really what I get out of the running. That's really, really important and beneficial for when I start falling into more delusional patterns of thinking.
Yeah, that makes sense. Some sort of routine, some sort of habit, and for you, the running really helps ground you. Kalpit, Hakeem, any thoughts on what do you do on maybe on a daily basis? Is some sort of routine that you do, kind of helps you, keep going and manage your symptoms, just being able to persevere? Like, what sort of routines do you do?
So I currently have a routine where I have a supportive system. So my dad, my friends, my family, my psychiatrist, my case manager. So that helps. Having a support system in place is number one for me. So it could be anyone, that's my best friends, etc. And then another thing that these are things that I learn over a period of time. So this is just not automatically happen. This is based on previous experience and through learning of observing. I currently take, like I said, the vitamins, etc. But I think exercise has been key. I currently take my medications every single day. I don't miss my medications. In the past, especially when I was in college, because of how groggy and sleepy they made me, I stopped taking them for three days in a row and things of that nature. So I learned that that doesn't work. I drink lots of water. I try to eat healthy, and my faith is what helped guides me, because I find I obsess over things. Like, for example, like the concept of delusional grandeur or concepts. And I have lists and notes. So lots of reminders on the fridge, even on the washroom door, etc. Reminders help. And I try to keep a notebook for keeping organized. And for me, especially because although I have a job, etc., I still have lots of anxiety, lots of when I go to work, or like say I just, for example, when I graduated my business degree, I still didn't feel like I was capable enough. So I got my job. I landed at Connections Place, which is a nonprofit. I did well there. And then last year, I got into the government job for internship, which I failed the previous 3 years because I had failed my exams before. So even when I have an exam, even when I have a test or any kind of assessment to get anything, I still have lots of anxiety and whatnot. So I have to manage. I try to balance fear and hope. So managing delusional grandeur and managing what's realistic and what's not, and really gain insight from my psychiatrist and my family and friends what delusions I may have had, and that will help me be successful and keep going, because my job is pretty demanding, and I was fortunate enough that they allowed me to be here today, and I'm extremely tired now, so I'm gonna stop talking.
Hakeem, thank you so much. And it's so interesting that you said trying to balance between hope and the delusions. The balance between those two, that's what you're trying to achieve through physical activities and through your faith, through other things that you do that just generally take care of your health.
Yeah. So right now I am trying to go beyond my own experience. So I did a lot of research on schizophrenia, leading on my previous job at Connections Place, where I help others develop their speaking skills, etc. A lot of people got jobs now and whatnot. So really learn about empathy and tolerance, and also learning about motivational interviewing. I just taking the course right now. And then I took mental health first aid. So anything that will help me help others better.
Thank you so much, Hakeem. And finally, Caplet and Chris, if you can share something, some routine that you do that kind of helps you move forward, or you've seen that works.
Yeah.
Other people.
Okay, so you can hear me? You can hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
I would say that one of the things that family members struggle with is how to communicate with a person who is experiencing psychosis. And so one of the things is trying to convince the person they have schizophrenia. That's useless. You're arguing with the illness. And also, most people do not want to be known as being, and I only use these phrases with you all. I don't use them in like large public speeches, but
no one wants to be thought of as being mentally ill or psycho or Looney Tune or some high-profile killer that unfortunately had schizophrenia, which is a minority. 97% of people with schizophrenia are not violent. So the arguing, what you want is a relationship with the individual. So if you want a relationship with the individual, you have to learn those techniques that help you to have that. So cognitive behavioral therapy, psychosis. So CBT and then small p psychosis. And there are family members that are teaching that. Linda Zepleg of the Zepleg Institute in Ottawa. And trying to get people to agree that they need to take the medication. It's a slow process because people's internal stigma, self-stigma, is struggling with that, as well as if persons have experienced psychotic medications, there are significant side effects, like significant weight gain, libido drive drops to zero, lactation from the breast, akathisia, et cetera, and also, unfortunately, people that are on long-term antipsychotics, like 25 years or more, 50 years, if they're started at 15 and whatever, they die 20 years younger than the rest of us. I don't know how many of you knew that. They down average, 20 years, more so, than the rest of their generation. So family members need a lot of help in terms of not trying to convince the individual, their loved one, with the biomedical aspects of what's happening. It's all about you want to have a relationship with the individual. So if you want to fuss and cuss and argue, trying to get the person convinced they have schizophrenia or take medications or whatever, I mean, at the end of the day, you really want to maintain a trusting relationship. And not that any of this is easy, okay? I'm not saying that anything that anyone has said tonight is easy. And I know someone said earlier, way on in the first hour, like anosognosia. So anosognosia, which is the Latin word, anosognosia, means lack of insight. And there are a percentage of people with schizophrenia or psychosis that their psychosis is so severe that their ability to realize how sick they are is compromised. So it's like someone who has developing Alzheimer's, and as it gets worse, they come to a point where they don't even realize they have the Alzheimer's anymore. Okay, so the LEAP program, L-E-A-P, LEAP, Dr. Amador Xavier. I always get confused about what's his first name and last name, but his brother, he's a psychologist in the States. He had a brother with schizophrenia, so he developed the LEAP program, L-E-A-P, and it's just great for helping family members to be able to know how to meaningfully relate with an individual rather than arguing all day with the illness itself.
Thank you, Chris. And you're right. It's a difficult thing, but trying to manage that relationship. I think a lot of people here are sometimes struggle with it, sometimes they're better with it, but it's an ongoing thing. Chris, you're muted.
If you tune into Mad America, just Google Mad America. So Mad America is an organization that tends to be anti-psychiatry, et cetera, but they have some excellent, they actually have some excellent material. I mean, people, there are a percentage of people who can come off their medication, hopefully physician directed, and they don't have to go back on medication. There are people that I know who say, well, I once had schizophrenia. A lady I'm thinking of right now, my same age, when I started the American Schizophrenia Society, and which is, 30 years ago. And so let's go forward now 30 years, saying my age, and she's doing well in Vancouver. And she does not have schizophrenia. So whether you want to call that clinical remission or whatever, when we are first introduced to people who have an initial diagnosis. Yes, we need to be serious, but we also need to be hopeful that people can get better with the appropriate supports that we've talked about tonight. So like I said earlier, if my brother Terry had these things, I don't think he would, I think 75% of the hellishness he experienced in his life would never occur, but those things were just not available. They weren't available. So working with family members is the fact that you want to realistically have a balance around the reality of the illness, but also the reality that people can recover. And sometimes I've told family members this across Canada, and I can go to St. John's, Newfoundland. I know there's a husband and wife there, mom and dad, and they say, Chris, you gave us hope, 25 years ago. Because I will say to people, I know you don't have hope for this. It seems so pessimistic, but I'm going to hold the hope for you. And while I hold the hope for them, it's based on lived experience of people who have gotten better, and not to minimize and not to say, for those people who don't get better that it's some fault or whatever. The cards that you're handed, the cards that you play with out of a deck of cards, it comes to us as it is in life. And, rather than the card players around the table being self-interested, they want to win the card game, it's where the rest of the card players, so to speak, help the other individual. I've never used that metaphor illustration before. So if it doesn't work, just email and say, Chris, that sucks.
No, thank you so much, Chris. These are very valuable insights talking about family and relationships that is so important. Thank you.
Hope
Thank you for all the opinions.
Thanks, Chris. Hope. Yeah,
hope. So I just want to say thank you for all the speakers. I know Lauren just had to leave, but she messaged me before. If you want to contact her, we will leave a contact information for her. You can reach out to her. But before all that, I just want to say thank you so much for all the speakers for being brave enough to talk about your experiences, talking about someone else, even being a cared one for someone who has schizophrenia. We've all been, a lot of people here have been affected by schizophrenia directly or indirectly, and it's always great to talk and speak openly about this. And I know we had a lot of great discussions in this meeting alone. And that's why these type of events are important. We break the stigma, we break the secrecy behind it, and we're allowed to have an open conversation. Just like how Chris said, you meet one person with schizophrenia, you meet one person with schizophrenia. It's just a diagnosis, and we have to get rid of the stigma behind the term associated with it.
I know that I'm reading Tracy. She says that our healthcare and legal systems are broken in the United States. Well, I get calls from Dubai, the Middle East, Egypt, Hungary. You don't, some of these places you don't want your child to be, if they're going to have schizophrenia, the services there are far inadequate as compared to the United States and Canada. The problem in the United States and Canada is accessibility in terms of having the funding to be able to provide the whole range of treatment options that we've talked about here tonight to people, especially in the rural,
it's also
rural areas.
A cultural thing too in Dubai.
Yeah. I mean, I get letters from, I get emails from people around the world who talk about their relative being chained to a post and exorcisms and so forth. I do believe there's a dark side to life, the good and the bad of the light and the dark as an imperfect follower of Jesus. But, for people, for people to be mistreated, they're mistreated. If you tie somebody up to a post or whatever and chains, that's, I don't care where that is around the world, that's mistreatment. They're not a dog. And unfortunately, outside of, the Western world, even in Russia and China and Korea's, certain countries in Africa and the Middle East. Yeah, you'll be chained to a tree or something.
Yeah, 100%. And it really depends on where you are and what healthcare system you're engaging with this particular diagnosis. But again, thank you all for speaking about this and being brave enough to put your stories out there for other people to listen to and hear and engage with. This is a very brave thing that you're all doing. So just a round of applause for, I guess you can't hear the round of applause, but just a virtual round of applause for everyone who has spoken today. Now, if you have any more questions, I know there's a lot more questions. I didn't get enough time to go through all of them. I'm very sorry about that, but I have to be respectful for other people's time as well. But we have the questions here, and we can definitely follow up with some of these speakers and being able to maybe answer those questions in potentially a video form or a written form, whatever it may be. We'll definitely try to do that. And please be in touch with our Instagram, where we post more clips of what you just saw today. And if you want to see the whole session again, please email us. And my colleagues are going to go ahead and put some resources, including our email, including our Instagram, including Schizophrenia Society of Canada and Cannabis and Mental Health. All these resources are going to be posted here and again posted on our Instagram. So with that being said, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for engaging and asking these questions. These are very important things that we're doing.